Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the Sikh channel, special episode of the Think Tank. We're joined here today by Mr. Harinder Singh from the Sikh Research Institute based in Texas in America. And today we're going to talk about the idea of the Sarbat Khalsa. We're going to delve into some of the history of the Sarbat Khalsa and what it means today, and could it be revived? And so, welcome, Harinder Singh Ji.
Sarbat Khalsa or Ji Ki Fateh.
I wonder if I could start today. I know there was a rally in Hyde Park and in Trafalgar Square, and I know that you were there bole sige. Please give us your thoughts on how you think the day went today.
I thought it was wonderful because, you know, is tarah diyan ralliyan har thaan te hundiyan ne. New York vich vi ho rahiyan ne, Vancouver vich vi ho rahiyan ne, and this is the first time actually I've attended the one in UK ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਦੋ ਮੇਨ ਆਬਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਮੇਰੀਆਂ ਇਹ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ। ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਿ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਕਾਮਨ ਸਿੱਖ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਸੀ, ਸਕੁਆਇਰ ਸਾਰਾ ਭਰਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ। ਸੋ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਇਹ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲੀ ਐਕਟਿਵ ਨੇ ਜੀ ਉਹੀ ਬੰਦੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਜਾਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਬਣਾਈ ਲਿਆ ਹਰ ਸਾਲ ਸਿਰਫ ਉਹੀ ਬੰਦੇ ਪਹੁੰਚਦੇ ਨੇ। ਇਟ ਵਾਜ਼ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਐਨ ਐਵਰੇਜ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੂ ਸ਼ੋਡ ਅਪ ਫਰਮ ਗਲਾਸਗੋ ਟੂ ਆਲ ਓਵਰ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਐਂਡ ਪਾਰਟਸ ਆਫ ਸਕਾਟਲੈਂਡ ਐਂਡ ਆਲ ਪਾਰਟਸ ਆਫ ਦਿਸ ਏਰੀਆ ਐਜ਼ ਵੈਲ। ਤੇ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ। ਆਈ ਮੀਨ ਆਈ ਸੌ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਮ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੀ ਟਕਸਾਲੀ ਵੀਰ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ, AKJ ਵਾਲੇ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ, ਮਿਸ਼ਨਰੀਜ਼ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਰਿਲੀਫ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਸੀ। all sorts of people were there. So this shows ਕਿ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ the larger level ਤੇ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਚੇਤਨਾ ਜਾਗ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਫੈਲਣੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਐਂਡ ਇਹਨੇ 10,000 ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਬੰਦਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਮੋਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਬਲੀ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਆਉਣਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਡੀ ਇਮੋਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਟਰੈਂਥ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰਤੀਕ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸੋ ਦੈਟਸ ਵਨ ਆਬਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ। ਜਿਹੜੀ ਦੂਸਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਆਮ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਨਾ 84 ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਾਈਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮਾਂ 'ਤੇ। ਐਂਡ ਬਾਏ ਦ ਵੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਕਮੈਮੋਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਾਰਚ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਫਰੀਡਮ ਰੈਲੀ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀ। ਇਹ ਵੀ ਬੜੀ ਇੰਟਰਸਟਿੰਗ ਗੱਲ ਸੀਗੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਚੰਗੀ ਲੱਗੀ ਕਿ ਆਮ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਾ ਵਿਕਟਮਾਈਜ਼ ਮੈਂਟੈਲਿਟੀ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਮਾਰਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਕੀ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸੋ ਆਈ ਲਾਈਕਡ ਇਟ ਫਰਮ ਦੈਟ ਐਂਗਲ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਨੇ, ਸਿਰਫ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹੀ ਨਾ ਪਿੱਟੀ ਜਾਈਏ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ। ਐਂਡ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਡੋਂਟ ਮਾਈਂਡ ਮੀ ਸੇਇੰਗ ਦਿਸ ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਅਸੀਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਨਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਮੈਂਟੈਲਿਟੀ ਚੇਂਜ ਕਰਤੀ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਿਕਟਮਾਈਜ਼ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਹਾਂ। ਇੱਥੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਕਿ ਅਗਲੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ।
Well, that's very interesting. And I know in the rally you spoke about that different jathebandis need to come together.
Yeah.
And you spoke about that we need to find a way for that to happen. Tell us a bit more about how you think that could be.
I was invoking spirit of the 18th century, you know, when the missiles got together, even in their utter disagreement. We know some of them were very expansionist. We know some of them did not like each other's even familial issues they had. They didn't like them. It's simply that's a human behavior thing. But whenever time came to deliberate on the Sikh traditions of figuring out what the Panth needs, they used to get together. And they got together and they deliberated on what needs to happen. 18th century is one of the darkest periods in Sikh history, as they say. You know, Sikhs were there were several genocidal campaigns. As we know, Ahmed Shah Abdali had demolished Darbar Sahib complex 6 times. There was a Chota Kallukara, Vaddu Kallukara. Even in that so-called dark period, I don't think it was dark. I think it was a golden period because people retained their Sikh identity, people retained their Sikh ethics, and instead of saying why the governments do this, they were able to give proper responses.
Okay.
So I was trying to relate that today. That it was great to see that various jathebandis are together. It's like old missiles coming together. And now the time is ripe that we need to start deliberating on these things as to what a response needs to be. It's been 28 years since 84. Yeah, the historical trend is that within 30 years we have proper responses. So maybe it's time that the new missiles are this. The new missiles are, there's a missile America, as I say, missile America, missile Canada, missile England, missile Australia, and there's missile Punjab. So maybe it's time for the missiles to come together and actually figure out a deliberative process where the agenda is not philosophical or religious doctrine. Agenda is what matters most and how should we respond to the current contemporary needs of what Sikh Panth is facing.
So let's think about that a bit more, because we want to get to we want to develop our thinking towards the idea of Sarbat Khalsa. And let me posit an idea that today was perhaps the beginnings of something like a Sarbat Khalsa coming together, something like different groups putting their differences aside and saying, what's the bigger goal here? What's the unifying theme that we must rally around?
Yeah.
Would you agree that that's a reasonable thing to say?
I think we saw precursors of that. Yes, I fully agree with that, because, you know, before people can sit together on a table to discuss an issue, there needs to be, you know, in the business world and corporate world, we call them team building exercises.
Yeah.
We usually do have some display of our emotional strength and emotional unity, but I think today was unique in itself, you know, doubling of the numbers and common Sikhs showing up, that they identify with what's been going on, and they are looking for ways to tackle this in 2012. So we don't want to just talk about 84, and we don't want to just look at the past. You know, one of the things is you cannot just rely on the trauma of what happened.
Yeah.
And what Sikhi teaches us from Guru Nanak through Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj and now through the leadership of Guru Granth Sahib and the Khalsa Panth, the idea is you don't rely on the trauma itself. You leverage the pain, you leverage the suffering, you leverage the torture.
Into something positive.
You actually, you use all that to define what you will do next year.
Yeah.
So, you know, for example, I know our community loves to talk about Jewish parallels and how they have done things. You know, although there are not too many things parallel, but one thing I do want to mention as something which I learned was that, you know, they used to say, they changed their, when they used to meet each other, roughly translated in English, they used to say next year in Anandpur. That's what I would say today. They used to say next year in Jerusalem. They said that for 1948 years. So I think we need to start saying, you know, Guru Nanak Sahib defined that we are sovereign people. When Guru Arjan Sahib was tortured, Guru Hargobind Sahib institutionalized that sovereignty of Miri Piri. And Banda Singh Bahadur establishes, Ranjit Singh established in his own way. Sikhs have done it 100 years ago when we got the Gurdwaras free. I think it's time again, we need to start carrying ourselves as sovereign people. The way we think, the faith is sovereign. So, you know, we are confused about faith also. You know, are we a mix of Hinduism or Islam? That's what books are telling us, and a lot of Sikhs actually believe it. But we are not.
Yep.
Sovereignness means that every element is differentiated from what existed before. Or to put it in other ways, we are supposed to be a revolution. Revolution implies that nothing of the old retains. Punjabi ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪੁਰਾਣੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜੜੋਂ ਪੁੱਟ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਨੇ, and they're replaced by new systems, new doctrine, new institutions, and newer way of doing things. And that's what we need to revive again.
And in talking about revival, and I know there's on the 17th of June in Oxford, you're looking to run a seminar or a set of workshops called Reviving the Sarbat Khalsa.
Hanji.
And I know that you've run something similar in North America, at least 2 or 3 times. And tell us a little bit about what you're looking to achieve in that forum.
Sure. You know, we are an educational organization, Sikh Research Institute. So what we are trying to do is we are looking at Gurmat traditions and how do you make them teachable. So we essentially develop workshops or trainings or presentations to revive the Sikh way of doing things. So Sarbat Khalsa is one of our institutions, which was, to put it in today's context, this was a Sikh way of developing consensus. This is what Guru had given to us. You know, consensus building is something we don't talk about these days because most of our institutional setups now have become very autocratic. Let's be genuine about it. Even when we say we are democratic people, but the way we operate is very autocratic. Whatever the head says goes. But that's not a Khalsa way of doing this. We are very anti-single person leadership. So Sarbat Khalsa is that mechanism. When implemented properly, which it was for more than 100 years after Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj, this is the system which allowed us to do what we call collective leadership. This is what allowed us to revive the Khalsa tradition. So I would say Sarbat Khalsa is exactly that. This is a tradition where we are able to revive how do we develop our decisions in a collective manner. Yeah. So that's what we are trying to do at Oxford Union. We have done this at Toronto, we have done this in Vancouver, and we are doing a few of these in US as well right now. But here the idea is, let's bring different jathebandis together. Let's bring different organizations together and their representatives. And in our utter disagreements, let's figure out, because this is what Guru demands from us, how do we still sit together and not worry too much about philosophical and historical and what we will call religious issues only. Sarbat Khalsa used to get together to deliberate on political things, things which were of immediate needs, and that's what we're trying to sort of do, a capacity building, as we'll call it, and how to make decisions effectively.
So when you ran these workshops, would you prefer to call it a set of workshops or a conference?
I would say they're workshops, because they're not really just people getting up and speaking their mind. It's more about let's learn our tradition, and then we go through the process where everyone participates.
So talk us through a little bit how it went when you ran these workshops in North America.
So and
the kind of issues that were raised.
Sure. I'll actually share a comment from Vancouver where we actually did an open invitation to all organizations. And that's one thing everyone needs to understand, that this is not Sarbat Khalsa, this is what we call Sarbat Khalsa activity or model Sarbat Khalsa, where the idea is let's learn, if tomorrow we had an opportunity to conduct a Sarbat Khalsa, how would we learn it?
Okay.
So for that we go back to Gurbani. What is the idea? Then we go to history, the precedents available to us, how it was run. Then we do a little bit of a timeline that from Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj period till now, what were the issues which we deliberated on? And then we run an activity itself where we pick an issue and the people of various organizations and their representative pick their representative to go deliberate on how to come to a decision.
And what kind of issues were they? Yes.
Well, so we don't like to tell that up front.
Right,
so, when people come, otherwise we don't want them premeditated. That's part of the problem. But we pick an issue that day where people have to then figure out how to come to a decision. So, the different mindsets sitting there. And most of us don't realize it's very hard to come with a collective decision. And the idea is let's learn how to make that decision. And one of the comments we heard, a representative of 3HO, which is, the Yogi Sikh organization.
So they were there as well?
They were there as well. We do open invitations to these, just like the one on
Tell me a little bit, just while you're on there, tell me a little bit about people who came, who some people may think wouldn't necessarily be the ones you'd expect at a Sarbat Khalsa meeting.
Well, the thing is, without getting into, we know what the issues are, some of the issues. So I don't want to get into who should be included and who shouldn't be included. As we said, this is an activity. This is about learning Sarbat Khalsa, so we made it completely open. Because when you are educating things, you're not going to decide who's included, who's not included. To run a real one, where the controversies arise, first you need to develop some relationships. How can I talk to you about a tough issue if you and I can't even sit together? That's what we are after.
So building trust.
We are saying it's like team building. Let's learn what our system is before we decide who's included or not included. So I was giving an example. That person came. He's actually a CFO of Miri Piri Academy. So a senior person in their organization. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, after the whole day, 4 o'clock, he said, I had no idea that we actually have mechanisms to come with decisions. This is the first day I've learned that we have things called Sarbat Khalsa and Gurmata and Hukumnamas. Generally these terms are used loosely,
so
but they are actually a very systematic process, which actually is detailed in Sikh Rahat Maryada. But the part of our this activity is let's revive this system. If it has taken 200 years to mess it up, it's going to take us a concerted effort of 20 years maybe to revive it.
And so does that mean the last, what you might call the last Sarbat Khalsa that actually happened was 200 years ago?
So I'm no one to give a categorical answer on that. Historians do generally agree that the least controversially speaking, that the last Sarbat Khalsa where it was actually truly Sarbat Khalsa was in 1805. Since then there have been attempts. A recent one was in 1986 as well, and we'll cover some of these things and we'll talk about what the controversies are. Because to have a discussion on today's relevance, you got to understand the idea and the precedents. So we cover in full detail. And the 1805 is a very famous one because we have eyewitness account of Sir John Malcolm. He wrote a book called Sketch of the Sikhs, where he very explicitly defines how Sarbat Khalsa was run.
So Sarbat Khalsa, if I think about, for example, the way the current Sikh Rahat Maryada was created, I think in the 1920s, am I right?
That's right. Actually, the draft circulated from 1932 to 1945.
So 1932 to 1945, a process was gone through.
That's right.
And various Sikh scholars around the world were consulted.
That's right.
And then they came together and they had a discussion and they said, this is right and that's not right, and they came to a consensus on it. Would you say something like that is a Sarbat Khalsa, or was that something different?
I would say it was, again, knowing what we know. It would be, we would say, in the vicinity of a Sarbat Khalsa. Because Sarbat Khalsa actually is a gathering. where nothing is premeditated, and it has to be truly exercised in the presence of Guru Granth Sahib, with the representative chosen from people who have come, who represent all walks of Sikh life, with an open invitation. And Sarbat Khalsa is a physical gathering. This is sort of like, I'm partly from Texas.
Yep.
The legislature there only meets half a year, and they don't even meet once a year. So in Sikh history, this used to happen twice a year.
Right.
Sometimes they were called Jod Melas. Generally during Vaisakhi time and generally during Diwali time. And we'll cover a lot of these details in the activity, but in short, that's the time they picked one issue, what matters most. And they used to sit there, whether it took them 1 hour or 2 days, to come up with that answer.
Now, I know you don't want to sort of preempt the workshops by sort of saying the sort of things that might be covered in the workshops. But can you tell me a bit about the sort of things that used to be covered in those old Sarbat Khalsas?
It's very, very interesting that Sarbat Khalsa covered everything which was political.
Right.
It only talked about discuss karde si. And this actually is a great lesson for all of us, because today we get into fights on what? Doctrinal issues. Khana kiya, pendana kiya, which bani to read or not. Sarbat Khalsa was never held on these things.
So what kind of things was it?
Economic and political policies, essentially dealing with persecution and state relationships. Simply put.
So in those days, so you're talking about 1805.
1805 is considered one of the last ones. So they started from the period of Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj onwards, and we'll go to some, and some of them are very graphic, and we, like tough decisions have to be made, and so that's what they dealt with.
And we have recorded history.
We have recorded history. Another thing I will share with your audience right now is, what we know of our institutions, in fact our history at large, is not very systematically recorded.
Yep.
So we have to put together pieces and bits from here and there, but larger thing available to us is Guru Granth Sahib, where this idea, in fact the Mata idea is in Guru Granth Sahib for the first time in the Shabad, where it talks about at the time of Guru Arjan, when Sulhi Khan was about to attack Guru, it says in the Shabad of Guru Arjan Sahib that first resolution was this, second resolution was this, third resolution was this.
Right.
So what we do know is, what we'll say constitutionally speaking, what is the higher principle. Then we have glimpses of those practices as practiced in the post-Guru period by the Sikhs like you and me.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is revive those. And in today's reality, if there are 26 million Sikhs right now, and if Akal Takht today and our systems are hijacked, which we know essentially they are, then we really need to put our brains together that what is the best way to do this today. So those are the kind of things we can start thinking about.
Okay. Yeah. So let me bring another point in here, because some people may say, let's say, being quite crude about it,
Sure.
somebody may walk up today and say, Sarbat Khalsa di galan kari janda.
Hanji.
We already have a SGPC.
Hanji.
Saਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ mini parliament ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ. You can open any news article, and that's the way they describe it. ਉਹਦੀਆਂ elections ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ. It's a democratic process. What's the problem? Why isn't that not a Sarbat Khalsa?
Because it's not, by very definition. They call themselves SGPC. So it's a bada moot point ho gaya na. But anyway, I understand the spirit of what you're asking. A lot of people say this. Here is a deal. Even if you believe they are Sarbat Khalsa, by any definition they are not, because they do elections which are held where you and I have no voice. So that's the first thing.
You and I meaning people
you
outside
and my
of India.
people outside of Punjab, not just India. People outside of Punjab have no voice on the representation. This is in America what we call taxation without representation. How can they ask us to follow a rule if they don't even include our opinion? So that's first thing. There is something genuinely wrong with this system. We have no representation there. In fact, I would say people of Punjab have some representation, but people of India, Sikhs, have no representation. The very act which is used to run the deliberations of SGPC is subservient to Indian law. I mean, this is like saying Vatican should follow Italian law. It's unheard of in anywhere in the world, So I don't want to get into parallels to SGPC and the shortcomings of it. I mean, SGPC in its inception was one of the best institutions available. We should look at the first few presidents and what they used to do, and Baba Khadak Singh was the one who showed so-called Mahatma Gandhi and how to really lead a civil disobedience movement. But that's a separate issue we can talk about later. Sarbat Khalsa is where it's open invitation. In 1986, not SGPC, few active Sikhs got together, did a sort of a call for Sarbat Khalsa, and now YouTube has videos of it. You should see that even when government had banned in those days in the 80s, hundreds and thousands of Sikhs showed up, an average Sikh, and there is no place to stand in Prakarma. So Sarbat Khalsa is something like that. And out of that, because now there are 26 million Sikhs, we need to really think about how do we create representation. Because 26 million people can't hold a meeting to come to a decision. So logistics, we need to work it out. But the bigger thing is, you can figure out logistics. Once you decide that, hey, I'm going to go from London to Glasgow, you have to first decide that. Then you can figure out whether I should drive or take a train or take a flight. So I don't want to discuss the logistics. First thing is, we have a system called Sarbat Khalsa, and this is Guru-given system. This is what Guru Gobind Singh said, that I'm giving Guruship to the Khalsa, which is a collective leadership. Maharaja Ranjit Singh, in all his greatness, messed this up. He's the one who undermined Sarbat Khalsa. He made sure that strong Sikhs like Akali Phula Singh and even his own journals like Hari Singh Nalwa never got together to do Sarbat Khalsa again. So he put them in different places. Anyway, the point is, it's been 200 years since we have dismantled this system, and that's why there is so much confusion. If you don't know how you're supposed to make decisions, then people will be installed who will say, this is how we make decisions.
And what kind of challenges do you foresee for trying to revive Sarbat Khalsa in the modern world? Because if we talk about 200 plus years ago, that was a different time, it was a different world in many ways.
Yeah.
We now live in pretty much Western-dominated systems, democracy to a greater or lesser extent, depending on which country you're in. There are laws of the land in place. So Sarbat Khalsa gets together. It thinks about, we've got an economic or a political issue that we wish to discuss. At some point, that leads to a decision of the Sarbat Khalsa. What happens when that juts up against national law or the law of the land?
This is why before, as I am a bit a student of historical trends among Sikhs, and every historical trend I have looked at so far, by no means I have done an exhaustive study, it shows that before anything of that nature is done, there is a preparation. Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj, through Guru Nanak, through Gobind Singh Maharaj, they did 240 years of training. That's when Khalsa Raj got established by Banda Singh Bahadur. Even 100 years ago, if we go, you're saying there are different times. Yes, times are different. To be honest, what matters is, do we know our own systems? I mean, democracy is not new. Democracy was there 100 years ago as well. I mean, if people want to escape everything by saying now they're democratic system, but democratic system, Nazi Germany was democratic. Look what they did. The other day I was reading something and the guy was playing with the word and he said, is it a democracy or demonocracy? If you add the word N, and we call this a tyranny of majority in political science as well, where the majoritarianism is the code word for, it gets used to describe a democratic system in most countries as well. But anyway, coming back to what you were saying, the challenges are several. Number one is there needs to be an awareness generation before you try to do this, because if we are not genuine about it, we will only invite people of our own kind. If we are not genuine, we will only invite elitists of power brokers. If we are not genuine, we will be complicit with the governments of the time. And all of this has happened in our past. We have to be literally, as we say in Ardas, and this is not a simple couplet. This is recorded by Bhai Nandlal Goya.
So it's going to be in Persian.
It's actually, this is part of the few Punjabi writings.
Right.
And we repeat it after each Ardas. I don't know how many times we have spent time to actually figure this out. This is actually Guru Gobind Singh Sahib saying this to Bhai Nandlal Goya. Suno Nandlal ji, idda karke likha unhone. But the line we repeat is, Raj karega Khalsa, aaki rahe na koi. I want to talk about that a bit. Raj karega Khalsa, there has been debate on this, not today. The debate even started in 60s, where Vice Chancellor of Punjab University Patiala, Bhai Jodh Singh, wrote an article saying what this line means, and he made it that Raj Karega Khalsa is actually just a doctrinal thing talking about only spiritually. Then Sardar Kapoor Singh wrote his answer. He's saying, no, this has never been just spiritual, this has always been political. And this is what I want to talk about. Every time you have a political revival, and politically I don't mean here by becoming a Gurdwara president, that's not politics, that's just a local issues going on. Political revival is when you are in charge of your own systems. When you say, let me make my own decisions. Even if it's the worst decision, let me make it myself. That kind of a mentality, that it's a self-governance idea, self-determination type idea. This is what Guru gave to us. Anytime you do that, unless people are trained in it, unless people are prepared. Jassa Singh Ahluwalia was not born a leader. He was trained under Nawab Kapoor Singh for 30 plus years. This is something we need to look at. Guru Nanak went through training. Guru Hargobind Pasha, as recorded in our historical chronicles, that Baba Buddha Ji taught him not only linguistics but also arms training. So what I'm essentially alluding to is we need to do some trainings. We need to revive our systems before we actually hold it. In America, we have this thing called American football. And the saying there is, make sure you catch the ball before you run. Because if you run without the ball, you're running without catching the ball, you'll never score. And that's what we need to do. I think we get too worked up and we want to do our events and we want to hold these sort of Sarbat Khalsa type things. But we really need to spend time understanding what they are. And that's what I'm after. Our historical trends are that Singh Sabha movement did an educational movement for 30 years. After 30 years of revival of awareness, Sikhs did their social movement. We developed our own literature. We developed our own banks, economic movements. We took our Gurdwaras back from the Mahants who were conspirators with the British government. And not only that, we freed India. So the social movement, Akali Dal, SGPC, Gurdwaras, banking, colleges was a result of 30 years of educational movement.
So let me drill down a little bit more into this idea of the 30 years of training. You mentioned Nawab Kapoor Singh training, Jassa Singh Ahluwalia. You mentioned the Singh Sabha movement and 30 years of training before all these institutions were created. And you don't have to give the game away about anything that's going to happen in the workshop. But tell me about some of that. What's in that training? What the kind of things are we talking about?
Well, no, we can talk about that. The training part is that right now we have cursory or footnote information of Sarbat Khalsa. Just like we want to go beyond that. We want to really, I'm sure you guys have very similar systems here when kids are going to schools and universities. We have something called Model UN there. We also have something called Model Congress. So what happens is people are shown how a particular bill is passed. Our people don't know how resolution is made yet. We think resolution, how a general Sikh political or Gurdwara system is, one or two people just make it happen. Well, that is not a Sikh way of doing things. So what we want to go through is, as I said earlier, the doctrinal idea, historical precedents, and then running a mock activity where people actually go through the motions of really deliberating on what is the answer, which works not just for my Jathebandi, which works not just for people in Britain, Sikhs living here, but which works for 26 million Sikhs worldwide. And that's something which requires a lot of thinking. It requires that, hey, this is not just about Taksal. This is not just about AKJ. This is not just about missionaries. This is about a Sikh living in Ludhiana, whether he keeps here or not. Also a Sikh living in London, whether he's Amritdhari. This is also about a Sikh living in New York, whether he follows Khalsa tradition or not yet. So this is something which affects every Sikh. Sarbat Khalsa was about that. We need to go back to those traditions, that people who are doing this on behalf of the larger community, their understandings need to be great, their inspiration needs to be Gurbani driven, and their training needs to be, the metal needs to be solid.
And you've already said the focus would be on political, economic type of issues. In other words, not exclusively.
We'll talk about that as well, but one of the things we have learned is as we study Sarbat Khalsas, and again, we are studying it, so which means there's much more work to be done, that the unification in the Panth was not whether we should read particular Bani or not. It was always about, they are about to attack Darbar Sahib, what should we do? They have killed this many Sikhs, what should we do? These are the issues they deliberated on.
Things that really
they have put a
concentrate
tax.
the mind.
Exactly, it's about real things. They are the things which are relevant today. That's what they used to talk about. They are putting a tax that we have no right to assemble at Darbar Sahib, what should we do? So it's very specific, it's very timely, and that's something which affects every Sikh. It's not just ones who are scholars of Sikhi.
And I'm going to sort of ask you, not to spill all the beans, to spill one bean. Give me an example of one of those things which is, let's call it a burning platform today.
I mean, I have my own opinions on it, but I think that's what I don't want to get into, to be honest. Because you see, part of the problem happening in the larger Sikh community is that too many opinions are floating, and what we need to do is collectively decide what matters most.
Okay, well, let me try another way then.
Okay.
If we do let's say one day there's a Sarbat Khalsa of some form in the UK.
Yes.
And there's another one in Thailand.
Yeah.
And there's another one in New Zealand. And they sort of come, and maybe let's say even Kenya.
Yeah.
Right? And there are differences between what they decide.
Yes.
How does that resolve itself?
Well, so this is where part of the understandings of reviving institution needs to come in. The Sarbat Khalsa is not driven, it cannot be held, as I understand it so far. It's not it cannot be held by what we will today call geographical boundary divisions. So Sarbat Khalsa, Sarbat implies all. So it needs to have representations of all. This is what Professor Pooran Singh used to call Khalsa Commonwealth. So Sarbat Khalsa is held on behalf of the Commonwealth of Sikhs, whether it lives, see, the homeland is just Punjab. Even when Sarbat Khalsa was held before, it included people of all sorts, not just the ones in Punjab. Like Jassa Singh Aliwale didn't even speak Punjabi properly. People used to make fun of him. This is what Ganda Singh has recorded.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, we have a lot of lessons to be learned that, we get caught up into trivial things and petty things. Sarbat Khalsa was never about that. It was always about, as I said earlier, like today, for example, one issue, if Sarbat Khalsa is called today, deliberation could be that panthically Sikhs are excited about or are looking for what should we do in a post-Rajwana case. Maybe that's what we talk about. I don't know. I'm just giving one example. But I'll take what you were saying in spirit earlier. So what Sarbat Khalsa institution does allow us to do is, it gives us some mechanisms, and we can deduct those out of a Sarbat Khalsa tradition on how to make local decisions. And so locally we need to figure out how to implement ideas of Sarbat Khalsa, but calling it Sarbat Khalsa will be by very definition wrong, because Sarbat Khalsa implies a deliberation on behalf of all of the Khalsa.
So let's move to the 17th of June.
Okay.
Sunday, 17th of June. In college in Oxford, we have a hall booked.
Oxford Union.
Oxford Union. And it's pretty much an all-day event.
Yeah.
What would you say to encourage people? Where do they need to go to find out more information?
Absolutely. The first thing to do is, it's an open invitation. We are recommending that people of various organizations, whether they're religious, political, civic, cultural, it doesn't matter, educational, this is where we need to bring diversity of the Panth alive. We are asking that only 2 people from each organizational setup come, whether they are Jathebandi or whether they are online organization, offline organizations, women organization, youth organization, Gurdwara organization, it doesn't matter, because we're trying to create a representation of things. And this is the invitation is for. Everyone is invited, but we cannot run a training for all Sikhs in Britain. The idea here is, let's get representatives of the organizations there. To find out more, our coordinator is Jagdeep Singh. He's put up a blog called Reviving the Sarbat Khalsa. You can Google it, and the email is there, phone number is there. Maybe once there's a break, I can find out what the email phone number is, and you can flash it next time. So basically, it's held on behalf of Sikh Research Institute. We will be providing the material to it. It is hosted by, I think, UK Sikh Council, is it called?
Yes, I think
that's what it's called.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I don't have the exact name now, but they are hosting it, and they're collaborating with us to get this done for the England populations.
Okay. So we'll make sure we get the number on the screen.
Yes.
And but I think if people can Google Sikh Research Institute or Reviving the Sarbat Khalsa,
that's right,
they should be able to track it down.
That's right.
Okay. And I guess the other thing I'd like to explore a little bit, I know you touched upon it, is I'm intrigued by this idea of it being open to all. So I know there's some kind of filter, because you're saying, let's try and keep it to no more than 2 per group.
This is just purely logistically, because this is not Sarbat Khalsa. This is learning about how to conduct a Sarbat Khalsa.
Yeah, but I'm really intrigued by the sort of the peripheral aspects of it. If it's open to everybody, so anyone can come.
Pretty much, because right now it's not a Sarbat Khalsa, right? Because what we are doing again is talking about what Sarbat Khalsa needs to be like, or we are trying to learn what it used to be like. So in learning, we're not going to put any, because we are not holding Sarbat Khalsa, we're just talking about it. We're trying to encourage that people should learn more about it. And yeah, that's why it's open to all. Anyone and everyone who wants to. And when we did it in Vancouver, when we did it in Toronto, and we're about to do one in New York in a month, they're not Sarbat Khalsas. They're model Sarbat Khalsas. This is a training workshop on how to revive consensus building Sikh style.
You know, I remember when there was an issue a few years ago, and it's just something that comes to mind, when around the former Jathedar of Akal Takht, Ranjit Singh,
Hanji.
and when he was released from, no, I think he was the Jathedar of Akal Takht, there was some controversy around it, and people got upset about that particular issue. And in Southall Gurdwara, you know, many Singhs came together from different Gurdwara around the UK, and there must have been a good 200 people there discussing this particular issue. And there was a chap from Punjab as well, and he said, you know, you keep on talking about Sarbat Khalsa as if it's some special thing that you have to do. And you know, I remember him saying, Sarbat da matlab sare, and you're all here, this is Sarbat Khalsa.
Yeah.
Is it correct to say that?
I mean, you know, we will say figuratively, okay, I can buy it, but no. Because this is why there's an undermining of a decision. When you don't make it a collective decision, when you don't make it a concerted effort, a genuine effort to be inclusive. Remember, we are the community which fought exclusivism. This is why Guru Nanak started his own system.
Yep.
And, you know, so if you want a proper decision making, if you don't want anyone undermining a decision, we have to give our 110% to make it very inclusive. We have, and inclusivism always has a criteria, so we should come up with what that criteria is, instead of saying ki bhai enu allowed or onu nahi allowed. Let's not make it anecdotal and dependent on one person. Even the criteria needs to be discussed, that's why. But I think I'm going to go back to it. If it has taken us, you know, governments have tried very hard for 200 years for not allowing us to assemble. Governments tried that before that too, but Sikhs were so, I would say, of the highest character that they rather die than not, or to compromise on the right to assemble freely. This is what we call in the West now. Paimani Singh Shahadat is that. Sikhs demanded to run a Sarbat Khalsa. They put a tax on it. You know, there are all sorts of things. I don't want to go into the details of it. The point is, for 100 years it worked. Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj gave authority to Khalsa to run this in 1699 until 1805. That's a long period. And you know the history of 18th century. That's why I keep going back to it. If we can do this in dire circumstances, today, I'm sure, you know, we have technologists.
Should be easier, shouldn't it?
We have technologists, we have consultants, we have literary figures, we have people who understand constitutional elements in the world.
Yep.
All I'm saying is we need to put our mind to it and give it some time, be patient. It's going to require some diligent effort to come up with how it really needs to be.
And there'll be some trial and error, and there'll be some mistakes made, and we'll learn from them, and we'll go 2 steps forward, 1 step
so
back.
This is why if we do enough of these activities, like Singh Sabha, you know, did a lot of different things. I think if we start doing this,
a learning process.
Yeah, you know, if enough people get into it, who knows what will happen at the next Sarbat Khalsa.
And just sort of slightly widening it out. This really reminds me of, actually, in some respects, the civil rights movement in the US and various other popular movements for whatever cause that happen around the world. One of the fundamental things that are attacked early on is the right to come together.
That's right.
You know, they very quickly clamp down on, you're not allowed to be in a group of more than, say, 4 or 5. Would you say that it's stretching it too far, that the Sarbat Khalsa has a consonance with that kind of idea?
I will change it a bit. The way I understand it, we actually did this before the world thought of it. Because we were so successful at it, incredible efforts were made to undermine it. And now, you know, if you have been, since you brought up civil rights, I'll use that as an example. You know how the slavery got done in America. You know, you have generations who lived through it, and they start actually accepting it. Then it required efforts by few genuine thinkers, and then they incorporated certain masters, the white men at the time, to make sure it was outlawed. In America, it was outlawed in the mid-1800s. It took them another 100 years to actually make it a reality. So in our case, I would say It was doctrinally announced and implemented for 100 years. This is great. I would submit to you, because it was such a powerful process, because it was such a collective action, because it was a genuine deliberative process, every effort was made, every effort is still being made to make sure Sikhs don't collectively decide things. So what happens now is we allow one person, one party, an expert to decide these things. No, that's not. We are neither monarchical, we are not exclusivists. We are people who, our leadership is chosen from bottom up.
Yeah.
And based on that, our representatives who we give a right with a particular set of criterias, then we give them a right to represent us. Right now, the issues of representation, who is really representing us? Let's be honest, people don't represent us, they are being put and installed, and then they claim to represent us.
And so if we think about, the idea that a monarchy doesn't really sit within the Sikh philosophy, doesn't sit within the Sikh system. And let's just, for a little while, explore the idea of a Maharaja in the Sikh way of thinking, the Sikh system. Many people adore Maharaja Ranjit Singh. There are, I think it's fair to say, the gilding of the Harmandir Sahib, for example, is actually quite a controversial subject when people think about it. But the idea of a monarchy, of a Maharaja within Sikh system, you're saying is not correct.
Oh, absolutely, it's not correct. We're not going to go into Maharaja Ranjit Singh in detail right now. If he did 100 good things, he did 20 really bad things. And that's what I'm saying. It's not a character assassination. We have to be Sikh, the Sikhs of the old, your forefathers and foremothers and my forefathers and foremothers. One great thing about them was, including in the case of Ranjit Singh, and he knew Sikhs don't agree with what he's doing. There's a letter which is mentioned that Hari Singh Nalwar wrote to Maharaja Ranjit Singh when he decided that Khadak Singh will be the next person, his heir. He said, this is the job of the Khalsa. We are the one who gave you the chance to lead. You cannot do this. That's one of the reason he made sure there was no Sarbat Khalsa. Sikhs who served even under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, when an order came from Akali Phula Singh, they did not even salute him. There are enough precedents, and Maharaja Ranjit Singh was aware of it. But, this is Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj, that's why I had given Guriai, as we all know, to collective leadership. And then we had representatives who led us. So
the authority was
decentralized.
Into the Panth.
Absolutely. It's decentralized. It was practiced very well for almost 100 years, as I said. And it culminated in 1899. And, this is a cyclical trend in us. When we centralize the figure, then we start following the figure. And that actually is antithetical to the very doctrine of Sikhi.
But wouldn't you say in a way that there's a natural progression that happens, that when movements begin, there is real fervor, there are people who buy into it, and that eventually it can become sort of centered around a particular figure, because it kind of collects around a strong man, for example.
But that's true, but we'd have these discussions in corporate bodies too. There is always leadership, but that leadership is not the board.
Well, that's brilliant. So we've got some calls coming in. Hanji, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਬੋਲ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਜੀ?
ਜੀ ਅਸ਼ਵਿੰਦਰ ਕੌਰ।
ਅਸ਼ਵਿੰਦਰ ਕੌਰ ਜੀ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। What would you like to ask, Ashwinder?
My question was, in terms of the Sarbat Khalsa, do all the decisions have to be made on the basis of unanimity? In which case, like if one person objects and everyone else agrees, or more than one person objects, how do you actually make decisions where, in situations where, connecting with the bar, you always have one person who votes a different way?
Did you have anything particular in terms of your view on that, Ashwinder, before we give our thoughts on it?
Well, my view would just be that in most parliaments or most kind of democracies, there's vote. So if DMP and Sarbat Khalsa is designed to kind of create consensus, is that on the basis of unanimity, or is that on the basis of a majority vote?
Sure. I mean, as far as the Sarbat Khalsa tradition is concerned, it's consensus driven. So it's never voted. It used to be, that's why the deliberations could be 1 hour, or they could be 2 days. The vote, and by the way, and we are learning this in management theories now as well. They tell us that consensual decision is the toughest decision, but is the best in the long run. So that's why there needs to be some training. And by the way, consensus does not mean that's the decision you like. It means this is the best decision you can live with. and there will be no undermining of the decision. So in order to get to that level, I'm going to bring in the history of 240 years of the Guru tradition. You know, when people don't have training, there are autocratic decisions. That's what Gurus did. By the time Guru Arjan Sahib's time came, they became consultative. By the time Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib is coming, they're becoming participatory. A Sikh is involved in doing things as well. And by the time Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj comes, it becomes consensual. This is what we need to do. We need to not rely on... So if it's a local decision, yeah, if it's a logistics issue, you don't need a consensus on that. That's inefficiency. This is why Sarbat Khalsa did not deal with logistics, philosophy, or religious doctrine. You know, in Punjab, even 5 years ago, actually it's been more now, it's been about 9 years for me, the last Part Bodh Samagam I attended. Part Bodh Samagam is where they study Guru Granth Sahib for a month. Of various persuasions, people come together to understand multiplicity. There are certain shabads where there are disagreements on interpretation.
If we just hold on to the thought of multiplicity, we've got another call coming in. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Tusi aapda naam dasso ji, please.
My name is Gurdeep Singh Kundan. I'm calling from Switzerland.
Welcome, Mr. Gurdeep Singh Kundan. What would you like to say?
I just want to ask Dr. Harvinder Singh that whether women were allowed to participate in Sarbat Khalsa.
Harinder Singh, not Harvinder Singh, yes. So were women allowed to participate in Sarbat Khalsa?
I mean, I think the question in 2012 is a moot issue. Women and men are equal partners in all affairs of Sikh life. Whether certain men like it or not is their problem. I mean, it's very clear to us that we don't have gender-specific roles. We have gender-neutral roles. So women are equal partners in every single Sikh affair. When we run our trainings, we talk about this. Even when SGPC, and just to give an example, in the last 100 years, we have gone through regression actually. Whatever SGPC might be today, when it was founded, back then, women didn't get a right to vote even in America. It was the same year that the bill was introduced, and Mississippi in America ratified it in 1984. Just to give you an idea. In those days, when SGPC was founded, 20% of the seats were actually reserved for women. Now, my point is, it's a big deal 100 years ago. So today, we shouldn't even talk about the quotas. We should be every Sikh. We don't need to look at what their last name is. We don't need to look at what their nationality is. We don't need to look at what their doctrinal or Jathebandik persuasion is. We don't need to look at which area they are coming from.
The women are absolutely included.
We need to become genderless conversations. That's what it is.
Call. Yes. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Tusi aapda naam dasso ji, please.
मेरा नाम तरसेम सिंह मैं मिल्टन कीज से बोल रहा हूँ.
Welcome, Tarseem Singh ji. Please give us your question.
Okay. Thank you very much, first of all, for giving me a chance. Very good conversation. मेरा question उठ रहा था कि UK ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ मैं केनिया ਤੋਂ केनिया ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ इंडिया ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ जिथे भी गुरुद्वारे ਹਨ उस गुरुद्वारिਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ हर ਵੇਲੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਝਗੜਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ this is a system I know which was inherited from the British era ਤੇ do you think ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ your Sarbat Khalsa ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ system ਹੈਗਾ can we put a new system into Gurdwaras to elect leaderships in Gurdwaras? Do you think Sarbat Khalsa kind of tradition will work in there?
That's an excellent question and a very relevant one because it's been 100 years since we actually cleaned up our Gurdwaras. It's time to clean them up again. Just like, you know, so by the way, this is not a new thing. Whenever power is centralized, people become corrupt. I mean, I think we're sitting in London. This is a saying from here. Power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think it was Cromwell who said that. But anyway, regardless who said it.
Lord Acton, but yes.
Sorry, Lord Acton, okay. I knew it was from a British thing. The point is, our Gurdwaras need to be, we need to go back to the original systems. And that's what we're discussing. What is the original system? You know, I think we are probably the only religion in the world where we have allowed elections to figure out who should run our Gurdwara. This is Westminster exported to the rest of the world, including in the Gurdwaras. That's not our system. You know, in fact, you know, I'll jokingly share this here. I was at Chandigarh Institute of Sikh Studies. They were having their annual meeting. This is a few years back. I wasn't their member, so at the time of the voting, I came out. And one of the older men also wasn't a member. He came out, and he came up to me. He goes, "Kaka, tenu pata hai andar ki ho raha?" I'm like, "Nahi ji, tusi dasso." ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਮਹੂਰੀਅਤ ਨਾ ਜਮਹੂਰੀਅਤ ਇਜ਼ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਮਹੂਰੀਅਤ ਪਤਾ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੱਸੋ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇੱਥੇ 49 ਗਧੇ ਹੁਣ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ ਤੂੰ ਗਧਾ I mean that's what voting is, you know, you can get anything done, and this is, we call it tyranny of majority sometimes. You cannot elect or select even. The actual system, if we look at it from the Vaisakhi 1699 day, it's an act of utter volunteerism. So what we need to come up with is certain criterias which are specific to job, and we need to see who best meets that criteria and get that person to do the job. What we do today is, you know, it's ਸਾਡੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੇ. So yes, reform is needed. I don't have a prescriptive answer for it. This is where we need to actually revive our tradition and come up with a very specific system on which is based out of Gurmat traditions, but which is implementable in 2012.
So yes, excellent. So there's no doubt we're not in any way excluding, in fact we're not excluding anybody, and absolutely women are part of the, you know, they're absolutely included, they're invited, they're welcome, they're part of the Sarbat Khalsa.
Actually,
that's no question about that at all.
I mean, I'm going to extend that.
If I may, because I think I hear some of these things quite often as well. People say, for example, you know, when the Panj Pyare took Amrit, their wives were not sort of part of the Amrit process. And these kind of things, even in 2012, we hear people say these things.
But, you know,
I'd like you to, if you can, dwell on,
I mean,
put it to bed once and for all.
Well,
women are part of
who the hell am I to
Sarbat
put it
Khalsa.
to bed? But this is one of the ways to look at it. I think that logic had its own fallacies. Well, back then the Sarbat Khalsa had one Jat and one Khatri and one Shudra. Are you going to collect those today? One came from Lahore, one came from Bidar. Are you going to go to those cities to bring it? I mean, whenever any institution starts, you have to look at the idea of the institution, not the person who is running it. And what we get into even today is, that's why we are such a hero-driven worship. You know, we are driven by hero worship to everything we look at the person. For us, person is not the important part. It's the process. This is where our failure is, as I understand it. So I would say that Sarbat Khalsa needs to have Dalits. We have totally excluded them. I mean, it's an oxymoron that I have to even use that word today.
Yeah.
That shows you Guru Gobind Singh gave Guriai to Sikhs, the Khalsa. And it included a Jat Boot Nai Tarkhan, as Ratan Singh Pangu has written. And there's a long listing, that's just a partial list. Point is, because we don't know what our tradition is, we don't know what our heritage is, part of the revival needs to be that these exclusivity we have created, who to include, who not to include, we need to get rid of that. We need to go back to our open, exclusive manners where we encourage, we create an environment where people are able to learn and in their own sort of a genuine spirit are able to volunteer for the highest levels in the Panth.
And I wonder if, in our last few minutes, if we could just sort of make a few comments on the fact that I know in your speech in Trafalgar Square today, you quoted Ratan Singh Pangu's line about Garib Sikhon ko diyon Padshahi. And listening to that quote again and the things you've said here in the studio, it seems to be that as we've not had the Sarbat Khalsa for so long, that in that period of darkness, you know, in darkness, fungus grows and bacteria come in and all sorts of nastiness happens. In the same way, perhaps, without stretching the analogy too far, within the Sikh Qaum, we've got these sort of fungus and weird things happening, and we talk about caste and we talk about Dalits, whereas, you know, the line of Ratan Singh Pangu talks about the Sikhs being Garib.
Right.
Maybe if you could just say a few comments about that.
Sure, I think people ask for what's wrong with us overall, you know, even in 2012. I say, well, this is the biggest symbolism of that, how we are not sovereign people. We actually are living a life of mental slavery, political slavery, economic slavery, spiritual slavery. We don't know, we don't know what Guru Nanak talked about. We now worship Guru Nanak rather than loving Guru Nanak. That's the difference.
Yep.
Earlier Sikhs, they saluted Guru Nanak because Guru Nanak changed their value system. Today, we don't even know what Guru Nanak's values are. In fact, we have made him to be something else. This is why it's so important to connect to Shabad. You know, Gurudwara di gal hoyi hai, Sarbat Khalsa di gal hoyi hai. Sikhs have become very good at their langars. In Guru Granth Sahib, when the word langar comes, first it comes for Shabad. And that's the langar we need to really distribute freely, which is wisdom. And I think when we are mentally free people, when ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਾ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਿਰਫ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਬਣਾ ਲਿਆ ਗੁਲਾਮ ਬੰਦਾ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਦੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ so we really are to work at Shabad frees us. That's what Gurbani says. And the person who is spiritually and mentally free, they will not accept any other slavery in this world. Well, not for themselves, not for their families, not for their countrymen or wherever they are living. Doesn't matter whether in Punjab, here, Bosnia, or Vancouver.
Well, I can't think of a better way of finishing than that. So just finally, if you're interested, Sunday the 17th of June, Sunday the 17th of June is the Reviving the Sarbat Khalsa. If you want to find out details, just Google Reviving the Sarbat Khalsa. You can go to the website and
Sikhri.org.
And Sikh Research Institute can also point you in the right direction. Okay. Thank you again to Harinder Singh of Sikh Research Institute. Hope you found the program interesting. And let's close on Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.